When powerful tech CEO Masellam Reed accidentally enters the wrong hotel suite, he discovers something that will change his life forever. Exhausted from travel and distracted by a company crisis, he has no idea that what awaits behind door 1217 will awaken feelings he buried decades ago. What begins as a simple mix-up quickly becomes a journey that will challenge everything he values. Sometimes, our biggest mistakes lead us to our greatest purpose. Masellam Reed rubbed his tired eyes as he stepped out of the elevator onto the 12th floor of the Grand Plaza Hotel. The soft ding of the elevator closing behind him barely registered. Through his exhaustion. 3 cities in 5 days. His bones ached. Masellam Reed rubbed his tired eyes as he stepped out of the elevator onto the 12th floor of the Grand Plaza Hotel. The soft ding of the elevator closing behind him barely registered through his exhaustion. 3 cities in 5 days. His bones ached. That is absolutely unacceptable. He snapped into his phone, squinting at the room numbers on the wall. The Henderson deal is worth millions. I don't care what time it is in Tokyo. His black leather shoes sank into the plush carpet as he dragged his wheeled suitcase down the hallway. The phone call was giving him a headache. His company, Reed Technologies, was facing its biggest crisis in years. A faulty chip in their newest phone model was causing devices to overheat. The news had leaked to the press this morning. "Listen to me carefully," Masellam said, his voice low and stern. "If we don't fix this by tomorrow, our stock will drop 30%. 30%. He stopped in front of a door, glancing quickly at the number, 1217. Masellam fumbled in his pocket for the key card, his attention still on the phone call. "I built this company from nothing," he continued, swiping the card. The little light turned green, and he pushed the door open without thinking twice. "I won't let one mistake ruin everything." Masellam stepped inside, pulling his suitcase behind him. The room was dark, but he didn't bother turning on the lights. He'd stayed at this hotel dozens of times before. He knew the layout by heart. "Get the team working around the clock," he ordered, dropping his bags by the door. "I want solutions, not excuses." He loosened his blue silk tie as he walked toward what he thought was the bedroom. His mind raced with worries about tomorrow's emergency board meeting. "Fine. Call me back in 1 hour with an update." Masellam ended the call and tossed his phone onto the bed. He sighed deeply, rolling his shoulders to release the tension. It was only then, in the sudden silence, that he noticed something was wrong. This room smelled different. Not like the usual hotel, scent of clean sheets and air freshener. This room smelled like paint and something else, something sweet, like cherry cough drops. Confused, Masellam reached for the light switch. The room illuminated, and he froze. This wasn't his suite. Instead of the usual beige walls with generic hotel artwork, these walls were covered with paintings, dozens of them. Children's paintings hung with care on every available space. "What the?" he muttered, turning slowly. His first thought was that he'd somehow been given the wrong room. His second thought was that he needed to leave immediately before whoever belonged here returned. But as he turned to go, one painting caught his eye. It stopped him in his tracks. Unlike the other colorful, childish pictures of animals and people and houses, this one was different. It showed a landscape, a stunning sunrise over mountains, with a small figure standing alone on a cliff edge, arms stretched wide as if embracing the new day. The colors were breathtaking, oranges and pinks bleeding into purples and blues. But it wasn't just the colors that made Masellam stare. It was the emotion. The painting somehow captured both loneliness and hope in a way that squeezed his chest. Muselem stepped closer, drawn to it like a magnet. He'd paid thousands for artwork that moved him less than this. At the bottom corner, in small, careful letters, was a signature. Hope, age 12. 12? That couldn't be right. No 12-year-old could paint with such soul. Muselem checked the door number again from inside the room. 1217. He pulled out his keycard and looked at the little paper sleeve it had come in. Room 1271. You've got to be kidding me, he whispered. In retreat. His distraction, he'd transposed the numbers. And somehow, his keycard had worked anyway. He'd have to speak to the hotel manager about that security issue. He took one last look at the painting of the sunrise. Something about it tugged at him, reminded him of feelings he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Muselem shook his head, trying to clear it. He was overtired, that's all. He needed to leave before whoever was staying here returned. He had a company crisis to manage. He didn't have time to stand around admiring children's artwork, no matter how extraordinary it was. He grabbed his phone off the bed and headed for the door, pulling his suitcase behind him. But just as his hand touched the doorknob, he heard the electronic beep of a keycard being swiped outside. The door swung open before Muselem could step back. A woman stood in the doorway. She wore light blue hospital scrubs and had dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she carried a paper bag that smelled like takeout food. When she saw Muselem, her tired eyes widened in alarm, and the bag dropped from her hand. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What are you doing? In our room?" Muselem raised his hands in a calming gesture. "I'm so sorry. There's been a mistake. I was given the wrong room number." The woman didn't look convinced. She pulled out her phone, her finger hovering over the screen. "I'm calling security. Please," Muselem said quickly. "I can explain. My name is Muselem Reed. I'm staying in room 1271, but I accidentally went to 1217. He reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out his keycard with the paper sleeve. "See? I transposed the numbers. I was on an important call and wasn't paying attention." The woman's eyes narrowed as she studied the room number on his keycard. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, but she kept her distance. "Your keycard worked in our door?" she asked, suspicious. Muselem nodded. "That's what I don't understand either. It must be some kind of system error. I'll report it to the front desk immediately." She crossed her arms, still uncertain. "And you were just leaving?" "Yes, absolutely," Muselem assured her. He glanced back at the paintings. "I'm very sorry for the intrusion. Your daughter's artwork is remarkable, by the way." At the mention of the artwork, the woman's face softened. She closed the door behind her and picked up the dropped takeout bag. "How did you know they were my daughters?" she asked, placing the bag on a small table. "The signature," Muselem explained. "Hope, age 12. Is she your daughter?" The woman hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I'm Vera Santos." She didn't offer her hand. "It's nice to meet you, Vera. Again, I apologize for the intrusion." Muselem moved toward the door, but found himself stopping again in front of the sunrise painting. "This one is extraordinary. I collect art, and I've rarely seen such emotional depth, especially from someone so young." Vera's eyes filled with a mixture of pride and sadness. "That's one of her favorites, too." Something in her voice made Muselem turn. "You've been here a while?" he asked, noticing now the small personal touches around the room. A worn teddy, bare on the couch, books stacked on the coffee table, a small plant on the windowsill. Vera sighed. 3 months. The hotel staff has been kind enough to let Hope display her artwork. It makes it feel more like home." 3 months is a long time to stay in a hotel, Musalem observed. Vera walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. We're not here by choice. Hope is receiving treatment at Children's Memorial across the street. Musalem felt a twinge in his chest. The crisis at his company suddenly seemed less important. I'm sorry to hear that, he said quietly. Is she improving? Vera's hand trembled slightly as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She was. The new treatment was showing promise. But last week, her voice trailed off. Despite his usual impatience, Musalem found himself wanting to hear more. Last week? Vera turned back to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She slipped into a coma. The doctors aren't sure why. Her body is fighting the treatment now instead of the disease. Musalem felt the weight of her words. He looked again at the sunrise painting, the lone figure with arms outstretched to the new day. It held new meaning now. I'd like to meet Hope, he said, surprising himself. I mean, when she's better. I'd like to tell her how much I admire her work. Vera smiled sadly. That would mean a lot to her. She dreams of being a real artist someday. She already is, Musalem said sincerely. Vera walked to the kitchenette and began unpacking the takeout, her movements mechanical, as if on autopilot. The doctors say we should talk to her like she can hear us. I tell her about people who admire her paintings, the housekeeping staff, the front desk clerks. Now I can tell her about the famous CEO who accidentally walked into our room. Musalem raised an eyebrow. You recognize me? Vera nodded. Your face was on the cover of Business Week last month. The tech titan who never sleeps. Hope thought you looked sad in the photo. Musalem was taken aback. He never thought of himself as sad. Driven, yes. Demanding, certainly. But sad? Children see things differently, Vera continued. Hope always sees what people are feeling, not just what they show. She paused, studying him. That's why her art is special. Musalem nodded, unsure how to respond. He checked his watch out of habit and was surprised to see that 20 minutes had passed. His company crisis was waiting. I should go, he said, moving toward the door again. Thank you for understanding about the mix-up. Vera followed him to the door. Mr. Reed? He turned. If you'd like to see more of Hope's work, she has paintings in her hospital room too. Room 512 at Children's Memorial. The invitation hung in the air between them. Thank you, Musalem said finally. I might do that. As he walked down the hallway toward his correct room, his phone buzzed with messages from his executive team. The crisis was escalating. Investors were panicking. Decisions needed to be made. But all Musalem could think about was the sunrise painting and the 12-year-old artist named Hope, who was fighting for her life across the street while he fought for his company's stock price. For the first time in years, Musalem questioned which battle was more important. The next morning, Musalem sat in his hotel suite, staring at his laptop. Emails flooded his inbox. The chip crisis dominated the headlines. His phone wouldn't stop ringing, but his mind kept drifting to the sunrise painting and the girl who created it. At 10 a.m., he made a decision that shocked even himself. He called his assistant. Cancel my meetings today. All of them. But sir, the board is expecting... Handle it, Diane. Something important has come up. 20 minutes later, Musalem stood outside room 512 at Children's Memorial Hospital. He'd stopped at the gift shop and bought a sketchbook and a set of expensive colored pencils. Now he felt foolish. What was he doing here? He almost turned to leave when the door opened. A doctor in a white coat stepped out, nearly bumping into him. Oh, I'm sorry, the doctor said. Are you here to see Hope? Musalem nodded, not correcting the assumption that he was an expected visitor. "I'm Dr. Patel," the doctor said, extending her hand. "You must be a family friend." Ms. Santos mentioned, "Someone might be stopping by." Masellam shook her hand. "Masellam Reed." Dr. Patel smiled tiredly. "It's good of you to come. Vera finally fell asleep about an hour ago. We convinced her to rest while we ran some tests on Hope." She opened the door wider, and Masellam stepped into the room. It was dimly lit, with machines beeping softly. Vera was asleep in a reclining chair in the corner. In the bed lay a small figure, Hope. She was even younger looking than McCallum had imagined, thin and pale, with dark hair spread across the pillow. Various tubes and wires connected her to the machines monitoring her condition. But what caught McCallum's attention were the walls. Like the hotel room, they were covered with artwork, paintings and drawings in every color imaginable. "She's quite the artist," Dr. Patel whispered. Masellam nodded, moving closer to examine the pictures. Unlike the hotel room, these were arranged in what seemed to be chronological order. He could see the progression. Bright, happy scenes gradually giving way to darker themes as time passed. "How long has she been sick?" Masellam asked quietly. "About a year," Dr. Patel replied. "She has a rare autoimmune condition. Her body is attacking her nervous system." Masellam continued studying the artwork. "And the experimental treatment?" Dr. Patel looked surprised at his knowledge. "It was promising at first. That's why they traveled here. Our hospital is one of only 3 in the country offering this particular protocol." A soft sound made them both turn. Vera was waking up. When she saw Masellam, her eyes widened in surprise. "Mr. Reed," she said, straightening in her chair. "I didn't expect you'd actually come." "I hope it's okay," Masellam said, suddenly feeling like an intruder again. Vera nodded, her eyes moving to the gift he held. Masellam stepped forward, awkwardly offering the sketchbook and pencils. "I thought, for when she wakes up." Vera took the gift, running her fingers over the expensive materials. "Thank you. She'll love these." Dr. Patel checked Hope's vitals. "I wish I had better news this morning," she said. "The latest test results show her condition is deteriorating." Vera's face crumpled, but she quickly composed herself. "What options do we have left?" Dr. Patel hesitated. "There's a treatment in Switzerland showing promising results for cases like Hope's." But what?" Masellam asked. "It's extremely expensive," Dr. Patel explained. "And experimental, so not covered by insurance." Vera's shoulders slumped. "How expensive?" "Over $1 million, Dr. Patel said gently. "Plus travel and accommodation." Vera closed her eyes. "We've already spent everything we had to come here. The insurance covered part of it, but the hotel, the extra medications..." Her voice trailed off. Masellam looked at Hope, so small in the hospital bed. Then at the walls, covered with her artwork. A visual journey of a child's spirit fighting against a failing body. Something stirred in his memory. A similar hospital room 30 years ago. His little sister Emma, also an artist, also losing a battle her body couldn't win. His parents had been unable to afford the experimental treatments that might have saved her. The memory hit him with unexpected force. He hadn't allowed himself to think about Emma in years. "I should go," Masellam said suddenly. "I'm sorry to have disturbed you." He turned to leave, but Vera called after him. "Mr. Reed, will you come back? I think Hope would like to know you visited." Masellam paused at the door. "How can you be sure?" Vera managed a small smile. "Her last painting before the coma. Look at it. She pointed to a canvas near the window. Meselem moved closer to examine it. It showed a man in a business suit, standing alone in an empty room. His back was to the viewer, but his reflection was visible in a window. In the reflection, the man's face was sad, lonely. Outside the window, a storm raged. The loneliness in the image was palpable. Meselem recognized himself immediately, though Hope had never met him. She painted this 3 days before slipping into the coma. Vera explained. Hope calls it the man who forgot how to feel. Meselem stared at the painting, feeling exposed, and understood in a way he hadn't experienced in decades. I'll come back, he promised, his voice barely audible over the beeping machines. Back in his hotel suite, Meselem sat motionless in front of his laptop. The screen was filled with urgent messages, but his mind was elsewhere. He opened a browser and typed, "Experimental treatments for rare autoimmune conditions, Switzerland." Page after page of medical articles appeared. Meselem spent hours reading everything he could find. The treatment Dr. Patel mentioned did exist at a clinic in Zurich. The success rate was promising, especially for young patients. His phone rang for the 20th time. It was his CFO. "Meselem, where are you?" "The board is furious. The stock dropped 12% today." "Handle it, Jim," Meselem said distantly. "Handle it? Meselem, this is a full-blown crisis. We need you here. I'm dealing with something important. More important than the company you built from nothing? The company that employs thousands of people?" Meselem stared at a photo of the Swiss clinic on his screen. "Maybe," he said quietly, then hung up. He picked up the hotel phone and called Dr. Patel's office. When she came on the line, he got straight to the point. The treatment in Switzerland. Could it be brought here instead of taking Hope there? Dr. Patel sounded surprised. Theoretically, yes, the medical team could travel here with the equipment, but the cost would be even higher. How much? "Mr. Reed, we're talking about nearly $2 million. Meselem didn't hesitate. "I'll pay for it." There was silence on the line. Then, "Mr. Reed, that's an extremely generous offer, but I should speak with Ms. Santos first." "Of course. Please don't mention the cost. Just tell her the treatment is available." After hanging up, Meselem leaned back in his chair, surprised by his own decision. $2 million was a lot of money, even for him. But the thought of Hope, never waking up, never painting again, bothered him more than he could explain. His laptop chimed with a video call from his executive team. Meselem ignored it. Instead, he reached for his wallet and removed something he kept hidden behind his credit cards, a faded, creased drawing on lined paper, a crayon picture of a house with a family standing outside. The colors had faded, over 30 years, but the signature at the bottom was still legible. Emma Reed, age 8. It was the only artwork his sister had ever created before she died. The next morning, Meselem returned to the hospital. Vera was standing outside Hope's room, arguing with Dr. Patel. "It's not possible," Vera was saying. "I can't accept this. I don't even know him." They both turned when Meselem approached. "Mr. Reed," Dr. Patel said, "I was just explaining your offer to Ms. Santos." Vera's eyes were red from crying. Her arms crossed defensively. "Why would you do this? What do you want from us?" Meselem had anticipated this reaction. People in his world rarely did anything without expecting something. "In return, can we talk privately?" he asked. Vera nodded stiffly, and they walked to a small waiting area at the end of the hall. "I understand your suspicion, Meselem Begin. In your position, I'd feel the same way." $2 million is a lot of money to offer a stranger, Vera said. Meselem took a deep breath. I had a sister. Her name was Emma. He removed the faded drawing from his wallet and carefully unfolded it. She died when I was 15, and she was 8. A rare disease, like Hope's. Vera's expression softened as she looked at the drawing. My parents exhausted their savings trying experimental treatments, Meselem continued. But it wasn't enough. The best treatment was overseas, too expensive. His voice grew hoarse. I promised myself that if I ever made money, I'd help families. In the same situation, it wasn't entirely true. After Emma died, Meselem had buried himself in work, building his company with single-minded focus. He'd forgotten that childhood promise until yesterday. "This is the only thing of hers I have left," he said, carefully refolding the drawing. "I've carried it for 30 years. Vera wiped away a tear. "Hope would like your sister. She always says artists understand each other." Meselem smiled slightly. "I think Emma would have loved Hope's paintings." They sat in silence for a moment. "Even if I agreed," Vera said finally, "I can't repay you." "I don't want repayment," Meselem assured her. "Think of it as an investment in Hope's future paintings." Vera studied him, searching for hidden motives. "Why did Hope's situation affect you so deeply? You're a CEO. You must see sad stories on the news every day." Meselem considered this. "I think it was the painting. The sunrise one. When I saw it, something woke up inside me, something that had been asleep for a long time." Vera reached out and touched his hand briefly. "Hope has that effect on people. She sees beauty even in dark places." Meselem nodded. "So, will you accept my help?" Vera took a deep breath. "I need time to think about it." "Of course," Meselem said, standing. "I'll have the medical team from Switzerland on standby." As he walked away, Vera called after him. "Mr. Reed?" He turned. "Hope would say you're more than what you do for a living. She'd say you're what you feel." Meselem walked back to his hotel, those words echoing in his mind. He hadn't allowed himself to feel much of anything in years. Success, yes. Satisfaction in a deal well done. But true emotion? That had been locked away since Emma died. In his hotel room, 12 urgent voicemails waited. Meselem deleted them all without listening. Then he called the Swiss clinic directly. "This is Meselem Reed. I want to arrange for your medical team to travel to America immediately. Money is no object." 3 days later, a team of Swiss doctors arrived at Children's Memorial Hospital. Vera had finally accepted Meselem's offer, though she still seemed uncomfortable with his generosity. The Swiss doctors brought equipment, medications, and hope. Hope remained unchanged, lying still in her hospital bed while the new treatment began. The doctors explained it would take time to see results. Days passed with no change in her condition. Meselem visited every day. Sometimes he sat quietly with Vera, both watching Hope's chest rise and fall with each breath. Other times, he told stories about places he'd visited around the world. "Paris has the most amazing art museums," he told the unconscious Hope one afternoon. "The Louvre is so big you can't see everything in one day. Your paintings would look right at home there." Vera smiled from her chair in the corner. "She's always wanted to go to Paris." "She will," Meselem said firmly. His phone buzzed constantly. His executive team was in panic mode. The company board had called an emergency meeting to discuss his absence. Meselem ignored it all. For the first time in 20 years, Reed Technologies wasn't the most important thing in his life. On the 5th day, Meselem arrived with a large shopping bag. "What's all that?" Vera asked. Meselem began unpacking art supplies, paints, brushes, canvases, and an adjustable easel that could be used from a hospital bed. For when she wakes up, he explained, arranging everything near the window where the light was best. Vera's eyes filled with tears. The doctors still aren't sure if she'll... She will, Macellum interrupted firmly. She has more paintings to create. That evening, Dr. Patel pulled Macellum aside in the hallway. The latest tests show some improvement in brain activity, she said cautiously. It's small, but it's there. Is she waking up? Macellum asked. It's too soon to say, but it's the first positive sign we've seen since she slipped into the coma. Macellum felt a surge of hope. He returned to Hope's room and found Vera reading aloud from a book about famous women artists. He listened silently from the doorway. Frida Kahlo began painting after a terrible accident. Vera read, "She used art to express her pain and turned it into something beautiful, just like you do." Macellum sat down beside the bed. He pulled out a book on modern art he'd brought from his personal collection. "Mind if I read for a while?" Vera looked surprised, but nodded. "I could use a coffee break." After she left, Macellum opened the book to a chapter on abstract expressionism. "You'd like this artist, Hope," he said, showing a colorful Jackson Pollock painting to the unconscious girl. He broke all the rules about what art should look like. As he turned the page, Macellum thought he saw Hope's fingers twitch. He froze, watching carefully. There it was again, a tiny movement of her right hand. "Hope?" he whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. Macellum pressed the call button for the nurse. Then he took Hope's hand gently. "Hope, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand." He felt the slightest pressure against his fingers. When the nurse arrived, followed by Dr. Patel, Hope's eyes were still closed, but her breathing had changed. Dr. Patel checked her vital signs and pupil response with a small flashlight. "She's showing signs of emerging from the coma," Dr. Patel confirmed. "Call Ms. Santos back immediately." Vera ran into the room minutes later, her coffee cup left forgotten at the nurse's station. "What's happening? Is she okay?" "She's responding," Dr. Patel explained. "Talk to her. Let her hear your voice." Vera rushed to her daughter's side. "Hope? Sweetheart, it's Mom. Can you hear me?" Hope's eyelids fluttered again. Slowly, they opened. Her gaze was unfocused at first, then her eyes found her mother's face. "Mom?" she whispered, her voice raspy from disuse. Vera burst into tears, clutching her daughter's hand. "Yes, baby. I'm here." Macellum stepped back, giving them space for their reunion. He felt a strange tightness in his chest, a mixture of relief and something else he couldn't name. Over the next few days, Hope steadily improved. Her strength returned slowly, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic about her recovery. The Swiss treatment was working. When Hope was strong enough to sit up in bed, Macellum visited with a special gift, a book of Monet's water lily paintings. "Mr. Reed," Hope said when he entered. Her voice was stronger now, though still quiet. "Mom told me you found my paintings." Macellum smiled. "They found me, I think." Hope was smaller than he'd imagined, with dark eyes that seemed too old for her young face. Her black hair had been cut short during her hospital stay, framing her face like a pixie. "Mom says you're paying for my treatment," she said directly. Macellum nodded, a little uncomfortable with her directness. "I wanted to help." "Why?" Hope asked. "You don't know me." It was the same question Vera had asked, but from Hope it seemed more piercing. "I knew someone like you once," Macellum said carefully. "My sister. She was an artist too." Hope studied him with those intense eyes. "Is she still an artist?" "No," Macellum said softly. "She died when she was about your age." Hope considered this. "That's why you look sad, even when you smile." Meselem was startled by her perception. I suppose it might be. As hope grew stronger, Meselem arranged for artists from the city's best galleries to visit her. He brought virtual reality goggles so she could tour museums from her hospital bed. He even convinced a famous painter to give Hope a private lesson over video chat. One afternoon, Meselem arrived to find Hope sitting up in a chair by the window, working on a new painting. Her hands moved slowly, still weak from her long unconsciousness, but her eyes were focused. "What are you painting?" Meselem asked. Hope covered the canvas with her arm. "It's not ready yet." Vera smiled from across the room. "She won't let me see it either." Meselem pulled up a chair. "Have you heard from your company today?" Vera nodded. "They called again this morning. The board voted yesterday." "And? You've been removed as CEO." Meselem nodded, surprising himself with how little he cared. "I expected that." "Aren't you upset?" Hope asked, peeking out from behind her canvas. "Mom says you built that company from nothing." Meselem considered the question. "A month ago, I would have been devastated. Now it seems less important." Hope resumed painting. "Good. You should make art instead of phones. Art lasts longer." Meselem laughed, a real laugh that surprised him with its lightness. "I'm not sure I have the talent for it." "Everyone has talent," Hope said seriously. "Some people just forget how to use it." Meselem pondered Hope's words as he walked back to his hotel that evening. The lobby was crowded with business travelers, their faces glued to phones and laptops. He had been just like them for so many years, always rushing, always connected, always chasing the next deal. Now, for the first time in decades, he felt present. Awake. A week later, while Hope was doing her physical therapy exercises, Meselem had an idea. He excused himself and made a phone call to Eleanor Hart, the director of the most prestigious art gallery in the city. "Eleanor, it's Meselem." "Reed?" "Meselem, I heard you'd gone off the grid. The business world is buzzing with rumors." "I need a favor," he said, ignoring her comment. "How quickly could you put together an exhibition?" When he returned to Hope's hospital room, he found her, sitting in a wheelchair by the window, sketching the view of the city. "Hope, how would you feel about sharing your art with more people?" She looked up, curious. "What do you mean?" "I know the director of the Hart Gallery downtown. She's interested in exhibiting your work." Hope's eyes widened. "A real gallery? For my paintings?" Vera entered the room carrying a tray of hospital food. "What's this about a gallery?" Meselem explained his idea, an exhibition of Hope's artwork to raise awareness and funds for children with rare diseases. The proceeds from sales would go to a new foundation he wanted to establish. Hope was immediately excited, but Vera looked concerned. "I don't know, Meselem. Hope is still recovering, and I'm not comfortable exploiting her illness for—" "It's not exploitation," Hope interrupted. "It's my art. I want people to see it." Vera sat down beside her daughter. "Sweetheart, are you sure? There would be strangers looking at your most personal work." Hope nodded firmly. "My paintings are meant to be seen. That's why I make them." As Hope's strength returned, she began creating new paintings for the exhibition. Meselem brought professional quality supplies and arranged for the hospital to give her access to a small sunroom that could serve as a studio. While Hope painted, Meselem received daily calls from his former company board. The new CEO was struggling, and they wanted Meselem back. He declined each time, focusing instead on establishing the Children's Foundation and organizing the exhibition. One evening, as Meselem was about to leave the hospital, Hope called him back. I have something for you, she said shyly. She pulled out a canvas that had been hidden under her blanket. It's finished. Meselem took the painting and caught his breath. It was a portrait of him sitting beside Hope's hospital bed. In the painting, he was reading to her, a gentle light surrounding them both. The colors were vibrant, the brushwork confident. But it was the expression Hope had captured on his face that stunned him, peaceful, content, and deeply alive. It's how I see you now, Hope explained. Not like when I first painted you in the storm. Meselem felt something crack inside his chest, a dam breaking after years of holding everything back. To his horror, tears filled his eyes. I'm sorry, he said, trying to turn away. I don't know why. It's okay, Hope said, reaching for his hand. Sometimes art makes us feel things we forgot were there. The night before the exhibition, Meselem paced his hotel room nervously. 20 of Hope's best paintings had been carefully transported to the Hart Gallery. Eleanor had arranged for art critics and collectors to attend, along with local media outlets. Everything was ready. His phone rang, his former CFO calling again. Meselem, the company is floundering. The stock is down 40%. The board is begging you to reconsider. Jim, I have made my decision. Is this about the girl? The one in the hospital? The press is starting to ask questions about why Meselem Reed suddenly disappeared to spend time with a child artist. Meselem felt a flash of anger. Her name is Hope, and yes, it's about her, but it's also about me. What does that mean? It means I found something more important than quarterly reports. The next evening, the Hart Gallery was packed. Hope arrived in a wheelchair, dressed in a blue dress that matched her eyes. Vera walked beside her, looking nervous but proud. The exhibition was a tremendous success. Art collectors marveled at the emotional depth of Hope's work. Critics praised her unique perspective and technical skill. By the end of the evening, every painting had sold, many for thousands of dollars. Meselem stayed in the background, watching Hope shine. She handled the attention with grace, speaking eloquently about her artistic process despite her still fragile health. As the evening wound down, Eleanor approached Meselem with a glass of champagne. "You've done something remarkable here," she said, nodding toward Hope, who was speaking with an art professor from the local university. "That girl has a real future." "Yes," Meselem agreed, watching Hope's animated face. "She certainly does." The success of the exhibition brought a wave of optimism. Hope continued to improve, working with physical therapists daily. The foundation Meselem established received donations from across the country. Even Meselem's Heidi, former business colleagues, contributed, perhaps hoping to win back his favor. 3 weeks after the exhibition, Hope was scheduled to be discharged from the hospital. Vera had found a small apartment nearby so Hope could continue her outpatient treatments. "You should come for dinner to celebrate," Vera told Meselem as they packed Hope's belongings. "Nothing fancy, but Hope wants to thank you properly." Meselem smiled. "I'd like that." But the morning of Hope's discharge, everything changed. Meselem arrived at the hospital with flowers to find doctors rushing in and out of Hope's room. Vera stood in the hallway, her face ashen. "What happened?" Meselem asked, his heart pounding. "She had a seizure," Vera whispered. "A bad one, then another." Dr. Patel emerged from Hope's room, her expression grave. "Ms. Santos, we need to run. More tests, but I'm afraid Hope's condition has deteriorated suddenly." "How is that possible?" Vera asked. "She was getting better. Sometimes with experimental treatments, the body initially responds well, then develops resistance," Dr. Patel explained gently. "The latest scans show the inflammation in her nervous system has returned. more aggressive than before. Meselem felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "What can be done?" Dr. Patel shook her head. "We're consulting with the Swiss team, but they're as surprised as we are by this setback." The next few days were a nightmare. Hope's condition worsened rapidly. The seizures continued, and she slipped in and out of consciousness. The vibrant, perceptive girl who had captured Meselem's heart disappeared behind a veil of medication and pain. Meselem threw himself into finding a solution. He contacted medical experts around the world, offering unlimited funds to anyone who could help. He spent nights researching obscure medical journals, searching for any treatment that might work. His own health began to suffer. He rarely slept, forgot to eat, and lost weight. None of it mattered to him. Saving Hope was all he cared about. One evening, Meselem returned to his hotel room after another day at the hospital to find a letter from his company's board of directors. They had officially replaced him as CEO and requested he clear out his office. Meselem tossed the letter aside without a second thought. That night, Hope had her worst episode yet. Her breathing became labored, and her oxygen levels dropped dangerously. The medical team stabilized her, but Dr. Patel took Vera and Meselem aside afterward. "We need to discuss difficult options," she said gently. "Hope's body is shutting down. We can keep her comfortable, but—" "No," Meselem interrupted. "There has to be something else." "Mr. Reed," Dr. Patel said softly, "I understand your devotion to Hope, but medically speaking, we're running out of options." Meselem refused to accept this. He returned to his hotel and made a desperate call to Dr. Leonid Sokolov, a controversial researcher whose experimental approach to autoimmune disorders had been rejected by the mainstream medical community. "Dr. Sokolov, this is Meselem Reed. I need your help." "Mr. Reed, I'm familiar with your situation. News travels fast in small medical circles. Can you help Hope?" "Perhaps. My approach is unorthodox. It involves reprogramming certain immune cells to stop attacking the nervous system. But it's risky. It could accelerate the decline if it fails." "Will you try?" Meselem pleaded. "I would need to examine the patient first. And there are obstacles. My methods aren't approved in your country. Money isn't an issue. Neither are regulations. I'll arrange everything." When Meselem proposed Dr. Sokolov's treatment to Vera, she was horrified. "You want to let an untested treatment be used on Hope? After what happened with the last one?" Her voice rose with each word. "She's suffering enough, Meselem." "It's our only chance," Meselem argued. "Sokolov has had success with similar cases." "Limited success," Vera countered, "and serious side effects in others." "So you just want to give up?" Meselem demanded, his exhaustion making him harsh. "Let her go," Vera slapped him, tears streaming down her face. "How dare you? She's my daughter. I've fought for her every day of her life." Meselem stepped back, his cheek stinging. "I'm sorry. That was unfair. You think I don't want to try everything?" Vera asked, her voice breaking. "But at what cost? More pain? More suffering? For what? So you can save another girl like your sister?" The words hit Meselem like ice water. Was that what he was doing? Using Hope to erase his guilt over Emma? "I just want her to have a chance," he said quietly. "So do I," Vera replied. "But we need to think about what Hope would want." They agreed to let Hope decide if she became lucid enough to understand. The next day, Hope had a brief period of clarity. Vera and Meselem sat beside her bed and gently explained Dr. Sokolov's treatment and its risks. "It might make you better," Meselem explained, "but it might not work. and could make things worse. Hope looked at them both with tired eyes. "Will it hurt?" "We don't know, sweetheart," Vera admitted. "It's your choice." Hope was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached for Meselem's hand. "I still have more paintings to make," she whispered. "I want to try." Dr. Sokolov arrived the next day, a tall man with piercing blue eyes and silver hair. He examined Hope thoroughly, reviewed her medical records, and spoke at length with the hospital's medical team. The treatment began immediately. For 3 days, Hope received a series of injections and underwent specialized blood filtering procedures. During this time, she drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling out names no one recognized. Vera and Meselem took turns sitting with her. They barely spoke to each other, both too afraid to voice their hopes or fears. On the 4th morning, Hope's fever broke. By afternoon, her vital signs had stabilized. Dr. Sokolov cautiously suggested the treatment might be working. A week later, Hope was sitting up in bed, her eyes clear for the first time in days. Her recovery wasn't immediate or miraculous, but it was steady. Each day brought small improvements. As Hope grew stronger, she asked for her sketchbook. Her hands were still weak, but her determination was powerful. Meselem watched her draw for hours, her face peaceful despite the effort it took. One afternoon, as Hope was sketching and Meselem was reading nearby, she suddenly put down her pencil. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Both of you." Vera looked up from her magazine. "What is it, sweetheart?" Hope bit her lip. "I haven't been completely honest." Meselem closed his book. "About what?" "That first painting you saw, the one in our hotel room with the sunrise, and the person on the cliff." Hope looked down at her hands. "I didn't paint all of it myself." Meselem and Vera exchanged confused glances. "What do you mean?" Meselem asked. Hope's voice was barely audible. "I was having a really bad day. Nothing I painted looked right. I was so frustrated." She twisted the corner of her blanket. "The hospital janitor saw me crying over that painting. He offered to help show me a technique." "A janitor?" Vera asked. Hope nodded. "His name is Gabriel. He comes to clean my room at night sometimes. He's really nice. That day, he showed me how to blend colors for the sky. He held my hand and guided it for just a few minutes." Her eyes filled with tears. "But when he touched my painting, it changed. It became special. I was too embarrassed to tell anyone. Someone else helped me." Meselem sat very still, processing this information. The painting that caught my eye that first night wasn't entirely mine, Hope finished. "I'm sorry." "Why are you telling us this now?" Vera asked gently. "Because I want to thank him," Hope explained. "If he hadn't helped with that painting, Mr. Reed might not have noticed my art. And then..." She gestured around the hospital room at the monitors showing her improving vital signs. Meselem stood up. "I want to meet this Gabriel." It took 3 days to track down the night janitor. The hospital staff knew him only as a quiet older man who kept to himself. When they finally found him, Gabriel was reluctant to come to Hope's room. "I don't want any recognition," he told Meselem in the hallway. "I just showed her a simple technique." But when Gabriel finally entered Hope's room, Meselem gasped in shock. The elderly man in the worn blue uniform was unmistakable. Gabriel Henderson, once one of the most celebrated artists in the country. He had disappeared from the art world decades ago after a personal tragedy. "You're Gabriel Henderson," Meselem said in disbelief. "Your work hangs in museums." The old man nodded sadly. "That was another life." Over coffee in the hospital cafeteria, Gabriel explained, he had lost his wife and daughter in a car accident 30 years ago. Overwhelmed by grief, He had abandoned his art career and chosen a life of anonymity. "I couldn't paint anymore," he explained, "but sometimes, when I see these sick children struggling with their art, I can help a little, just a touch here and there." "You've done this before?" Meselem asked. "Many times. I work in hospitals because it gives me purpose. These children heal me more than I help them." Meselem sat back, stunned by the revelation. The painting that had caught his attention that first night, the one that had touched his soul and set everything in motion, had been guided by the hand of a master artist. "It was never just about Hope's painting," Meselem said softly. "It was about finding you too." Gabriel shook his head. "No, Mr. Reed. It was about all three of us finding each other." As Hope continued to recover, Gabriel agreed to mentor her properly, and the foundation Meselem had established expanded its mission to include art therapy for children with serious illnesses, with Gabriel as its artistic director. Years later, people would ask Meselem why he walked away from his technology empire to devote himself to a children's foundation. He always smiled and told them the same thing. "I entered the wrong hotel suite one night and found something I didn't know I was looking for." That was the end of Wealthy CEO entered the wrong hotel suite and was blown away by what he saw. I hope you enjoyed this emotional journey of how a chance encounter changed 3 lives forever. Where are you listening from? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more engaging stories like this one. Don't forget to share with your friends and family to spread kindness and awareness. Sometimes the wrong turn can lead us to exactly where we need to be.